Good morning, everybody. Rockville, awesome. That was just you starting off by saying it takes a baby step, looking for the low-hanging fruit, identifying the way in which you can show continuous progress towards a greater level of sustainability, but not be overcome with, oh my gosh, I'm going to go down this path and this is going to be really hard. So congratulations, that's really awesome. I'm also going to hit, is Thomas still in here, our legislative guy that was talking earlier. I'm going to, there you are. So I'm going to hit on some of the, totally just have the laser pointer right on you. And it wasn't for any purpose other than I hit the wrong button. But I'm going to hit on some issues and ideas that I think can be really important for how to position golf in a very different way that might be beneficial. So this is going to be a story. It's going to be interactive. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to need your input. Your superintendents may have heard some of these presentations or portions of this over the time, but I would prefer that you step out of your comfort zone and take a chance to answer some of these questions as well. So for the first time in history, pre-pandemic, more people lived in urban areas of the world than they do in rural America. So people are concentrating in city centers. More people moving in, more people demanding the services that are provided by those urban centers. And that comes with certainly a lot of challenges. Those challenges like water pollution, air pollution, mental and physical health, urban heat. These things are happening because we have more and more people concentrating in smaller and smaller areas. So how does this impact, or how does this idea that more and more are coming in affect or is part of the conversation regarding golf courses themselves? Because the connection of plants and people, you think about it, more and more people move in, what's their connection to a plant? It's not through corn, sorghum, wheat, barley, potatoes. It's going to be more toward those things that you cherish on your golf course. Turf grass, trees, ornamentals, perennials, etc. And so that connection of plant and people is what you hold so valuable that's right behind us. The turf grass. But the turf grass is there, and you value it for its recreation purposes. You value it for its aesthetic value. You value it because of the long-standing history of your family. But you value it because you are inside the four walls of the golf course. Do others that live adjacent to this property receive value from that grass, from those trees, from those pollinators? Outside of the four walls. So look at this. This is a mass transit, and it is these planted areas of turf grass, and the train runs through these planted areas in a high-density urban area in the world. What's the purpose of that grass? I mean, from the symbol, you can just say it looks nice. Okay? What else is the purpose of that grass? Say it again? So stormwater retention, absolutely. What else is their benefit? Cooling, okay? Urban cooling, because plants transpire, and when they transpire, they cool the area around it. What else?
Mental health.
Mental health, yeah. Noise reduction, yeah, absolutely.
Pet relief.
Say it again.
Pet relief.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? Say it again. Erosion control. Okay, this is awesome. Any other?
CO2 produces oxygen.
Tell me more about plant physiology. Come on up. No, I'm just kidding. No, you did great. You did great. Yes, takes up carbon, releases oxygen. Anything else? Does that go on right back here too? Do these same things we just described on these small little paddocks of grass in some major urban area that a train drives over, does that same stuff happen here? Yeah, absolutely it does. How do we talk about that? How does that get to your membership? How does that get from you, superintendent, to your grants committee, to your membership? What do these trees do? Think about it in the same way you just thought about it with the grass. What's the value of these trees in this urban, dense area? Shade, cooling, aesthetics, habitat, biodiversity, pollinators. What else? Carbon sequestration. Yeah, all the so hand in hand. Think about what a park looks like to you. A park is grass and trees and trails and a place to recreate, but it also is all of these things that we just listed out. And all of these things are referred to as ecosystem services. The service that the ecosystem, or the area of interest, is providing to others. Recreation, scenic quality, urban cooling, air purification, noise attenuation, biodiversity, mental health, carbon sequestration, stormwater retention, pollination. All of these things are and will continue to happen in urban green space. How does that get told? How do we position golf so that these elevate to in a way in which those that don't recreate or don't come into a golf property see value from the urban green space that golf is? Because, as was pointed out, the pressure on public, specifically golf facilities and municipal golf facilities, is immense. Whether it's a housing project that's being proposed because we need more housing in cities, or because we need in one of the places that I used to live, they were seeking out a new place for a mushroom farm. So there are people who look at 150 contiguous acres of land in a dense populated area and say, why is it golf? Why golf? Well, because we have 20,000 rounds on that property a year. Does that justify it? Why golf? If you look at a picture like this, you see the neighborhood to the north and the city off in the background, and you obviously see a drainage swale moving through the golf course and lots of trees. Certainly, these individuals here receive benefit from having this managed landscape right next to it. So my intention here today is to help us talk differently about how those that don't recreate on the golf course receive value from the golf course that is adjacent to them. There was a time in which, if you look at this, there are 4 different bubbles here. There's the social capital, the built capital, the natural capital, and the human capital. And as history has evolved and mankind has evolved, we have gone from having an exorbitant amount of natural capital, nature, with little built or human capital. And now we are shifting to having greater human and built capital, more roads, bridges, buildings, etc., at the expense of natural capital. If more are moving in and the connection of plants to people around these ecosystem services are important, which I think we all in this room agree to, how are we going to balance this idea that built and human capital is taking away from our natural capital? So the RNA talks about sustainability of turf as optimizing the function of turf grass in urban settings in harmony with the conservation of the natural environment under economically sound and and socially responsible management. There are certainly some buzzwords that are in there, right? Pick a few of them out. Function, harmony, conservation, natural environment, socially responsible. So ecosystem services can't just be presented without thinking about trade-off. Okay, so I can't say, and we can't say that our golf course is sustainable. Why is that? Are we sustainable? What is the definition of sustainability? Something that is I'm gonna tweak it a little bit. Without input. Something that is maintained on its own without the use of need for input. So can the golf industry, can a golf facility be sustainable? So say more. Okay. So but inputs are also required from a mowing perspective. So can we ever get away from mowing? Through robotics. Okay, sheep and goats. So we're going back to the beginning. Fantastic. Okay, so we can be sustainable. Are you ready for that? Asking the wrong people. There's these trade-offs that represent this balance. And so I'm going to talk about sustainability in relation to making continuous progress towards a greater level of sustainability. Let me say that again, a continuous progress towards a greater level of sustainability. So if we choose to do something like convert 4 acres into our wildflower to enhance our pollination and our biodiversity in our golf course, that comes with trade-offs. And those trade-offs may or may not require inputs, but we're valuing the ecosystem services of the pollinator habitat at the expense of something else. Being open and transparent of what those something else's are will help to sell the idea that biodiversity is more important than us having that 4 acres for some other purpose. So sustainability in turfgrass is more than inputs, it's more than pest control, it's more than conservation. It's about connecting the landscape to the community in ways that benefit both. What value is turfgrass to a community? What value is turfgrass to a community? So we've already listed these ecosystem services, and these were defined back in the early 90s, and they've been talked about, with Adam, how much money is you at the Green Section now contributed to research?
$46 million.
$46 million in investment in research from the Green Section over the course of
100 years.
Over 100 years, which is absolutely amazing. But what has come out of that work is the definition of these benefits that happen from the turfgrass itself. So let's do a little case study, and this is around water. And this will circle back. So turfgrass in the U.S., there's approximately 50 million acres of turfgrass, and there's 3 times more irrigated turf than irrigated corn, which makes turfgrass the largest single irrigated crop in the United States. This is a study that looked at the satellite fraction of turfgrass across the United States. In each one of these areas that are green, you can see a larger propensity of turfgrass in that area. And so for the Detroit area where I'm currently at, or in that state of Michigan, here's where I used to live in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and St. Paul, and then of course we are over here. So if we take a look at the golf course makeup in general, the average 18-hole golf facility is 150 acres. Of that is 100 acres of managed turf. So around 2/3 of the property is managed with inputs. You can do the math that at this point in time of this case study, there's roughly 16,000 golf courses, so that makes about 2.5 or 2.25 million acres of turf grass on golf courses. In that 100 acres of managed turf, roughly 6% is in greens and tees, roughly 50% is in your rough and 30% are in your fairways. So the biggest place for potential impact is in that management area that tends to be the largest area, right? So the rough, in the fairways, making up 81% of your managed landscape, is where the greatest chance of impact is related to input reduction strategies. Now let's overlay that with our water use consumption. So we, in the Northeast, the average golf course at this point in time is using 13.8 million gallons of water. In the North Central region where I'm at, uses roughly 25 million gallons of water a year. Those numbers seem to make sense based on where you're at right now. Superintendents? 13? Higher? A lot higher? Double? Okay. So this was back, this data was collected back in the mid-2000s. And so dated, 15 years, but I'll show you a follow-up to it here in a second. But what's interesting is you look across these numbers, and for you non-superintendents, think about 25 million gallons of water. Is that a lot of water? No. In the great scheme of things, no. So there is a perspective that goes along with this. So if we were to take at this point in time, back in the early 2000s when this first survey was done, there were 16,797 golf courses. And if you looked at all of the agronomic regions across the country and the volume of water used on average per facility, we had an estimated annual total water used by the golf industry of 762 billion gallons of water. Same question. Is that a lot of water? Same answer. Perspective. So the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, estimates the total annual water use on golf courses at 762, but the estimated water use in the U.S. per day is 408 billion gallons of water. Perspective, right? So 408 billion gallons of water a day is used annually or daily in the U.S. And the golf industry uses 762 billion gallons for the year, which accounts then for 1.6% of the irrigation water and 0.5% of the overall water use domestically. This is the one that I don't know that I'm going to get the same answer that quickly, Dave. Can we justify this number? Can golf justify 0.5% of the total potable water use in the country for its purpose? Okay, we can?
Water is recharged.
Recharged. Same one.
Goes back in the hydrologic cycle.
Okay, so we're recycling some water?
Yep.
Okay. People know that?
Probably not enough.
Is 0.5%? I mean, to me, this is the number that I was like, okay, I get the perspective thing, and I get it that 400 billion a day is used and golf uses 762, whatever. But 0.5% of the total water used is for golf. And it got us thinking as a group of individuals that are trying to figure out how to position golf differently. How do you defend 0.5% of water for recreation for golf?
Yeah, what are some of the other?
Absolutely.
What are some of the? What are some? We know some of the other things. Like I'd like to know how much water is being used for car washes, right? Compare, just to see.
Right. So you want more data and information about other uses of water and how they compare to it. Good point. Good question.
It also matters who's competing for that. What are the other uses of that? They're very different in the southeast than they are in the southwest.
Okay, so different, but Tom said earlier that things are moving west to east, and regulations are moving west to east. And so we know that there's a demand for water there, and the cost for water there is very high. So if you have your annual maintenance budget and it's $1.7 million a year, and you're going to spend another $1 million a year on water, which is what it costs out west, how do you get that $1 million? So things are moving west to east. To your point, yes. And what was stated up here is all of those positive things that those ecosystem services help us to justify that 0.5%. Totally agree. But we need to be more outwardly facing and talking more openly about what those benefits are. This research was redone, so that was every 10 years, the superintendents receive a survey from the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. They fill out this survey, and it helps us to benchmark and track progress over time. Remember, sustainability and how we get to a more sustainable is through continuous progress over time. So when they redid it a decade later, there was a 22% reduction in water and 1.4% of the irrigation water use. So it was an overall reduction, which was great news. When you walk through an airport and you see those billboards as you're walking down the corridors, and the marketing people are brilliant at this, but you literally have like a couple of seconds, catch your eye, move on. And this one caught my eye because it goes to what is the golf course in general. What is their airport slogan? What is your airport slogan? If I turn the water off brushing my teeth, I save 8 gallons of water. Boom! I can tell that one to my kids real quick. Turn off the water while you're brushing your teeth, you're going to save 8 gallons of water. How do we tell our story quickly, efficiently, and not get bogged down in the weeds? Okay, so along the horizontal axis here, we have resource inputs, environmental impact, or cost, from low to high. And on the vertical axis here, we have the turfgrass quality or player satisfaction. And certainly, we would like to be where we have the fewest amount of resources required to give us the highest turfgrass quality and the highest player satisfaction. But that's not where we live today. That's not where we live. We tend to own this space of normal operation, and a lot of that is just CYA and hedging our bets, and lack of innovation, lack of technology, lack of ability from what Dave was talking about and support from some of our Greens committees that allow us to push the envelopes a little bit toward this zone of maximum efficiency. But what I want to point out here is that I would argue that there's going to be a point where there's going to be this zone of maximum stewardship, where we're going to have reduced expectations, not solely based on aesthetics and not solely based on function, but we're going to have to reduce our inputs and our player satisfaction and quality in order to get something else out of that system. We're not quite there yet, but sheep and goats, that would get you there. Okay, so I was very fortunate and to be a part of a partnership with USGA. Matt Pringle, Adam Moeller were a part of this team, and we started this back when I was at the University of Minnesota, and it's been a long-standing relationship around some big challenges facing the golf industry, one of which was answering the question. So I set this whole thing up about what golf is in an urban environment and what it means. But the question that we wanted to ask around this natural capital project was, if not a golf course, then what? Okay, so one of the oldest golf course in Minneapolis and St. Paul is Town and Country Club, right on the Mississippi River. Beautiful location, right in downtown St. Paul. St. Thomas is a private school just next door to Town and Country. St. Thomas just made an unsolicited bid for Town and Country Golf Course, Country Club, for $65 million to put a new hockey facility because they don't have any more land left. An unsolicited bid. There's some chutzpah there. Just to go and say, I'm going to write in the newspaper, I want to take over this golf course. So, my mind was, okay, if not golf, then hockey rink. If not golf, then parking lot. If not golf, then residential development. If not golf, what's the impact on the Mississippi River, the Gulf of Mexico? You follow me here? If not golf, then what became the premise behind this natural capital project? The Natural Capital Project is a broader consortium of individuals than just this golf course project. It's made up of the University of Minnesota and Stanford, The Nature Conservancy, the World Wildlife Fund, two very unlikely partners in the golf space, by the way. The Nature Conservancy is pretty interesting. They started their organization around how they can protect nature from people. Okay? How do you protect nature from people? Yes. And as more and more people move into these densely urban areas, they realize that they also need to think about how to integrate nature and people. It can't just be about protecting anymore. It has to be the integration of, because those values hold on both sides. So the Nature Conservancy has been a good partner in this project because they help us identify different groups of people, Tom, that are unlikely but are willing to listen and be open-minded without thinking about what they're going to say next. This natural capital project is a model. It's called INVEST. And I want to just point out that publicly available data today is what we can get access to is really unreal. So the biophysical features of a urban landscape, which would include all the buildings and the roads and the infrastructure and the pipes and the sewer systems, all of that has data associated with it that's publicly available. And what we do with this model is essentially go into a city, go into an area, and extrapolate publicly available data that allows us then to measure the ecosystem services and predict the ecosystem services based on the publicly available data that's there. I'll explain a little bit more. So we can go in and recognize that these two golf courses exist in this residential area of a city center. And we want to be able to, and the anticipated goal from this project was to, can those golf courses contribute natural infrastructure to enhance community needs in urban areas? So we wanted to look at these golf courses here, specifically this one. This is Les Volstead Golf Course, University of Minnesota's golf course. And we wanted to know, can that golf course be managed to contribute natural infrastructure to enhance community needs in urban areas? Okay. Stay with me here for a second. The current position in golf tends to focus itself around the economics of the game and then the golf itself, player satisfaction. The environment and the community are kind of second, maybe third, maybe fifth. Because we need to make sure that the economics work and that the golfer's happy and that the player satisfaction is high. And then we can worry about this stuff over here. But what I'm proposing is that we kind of flip this a little bit. I'm proposing that we look at these factors and that we change and break down this barrier or threat where the environment and the community, let's change it around. What if we enjoyed the benefit of golf, but the community saw that that golf course was not the threat that is perceived for it to be now? What if they saw 4 acres of pollinator habitat and they knew that the area of influence, new term, the area of influence that surrounds a golf course that the pollinators live on, those pollinators travel outside of that golf course to pollinate other plants that live in that area around the golf course? So what if we change the narrative where the environment and the community drives the economic and golf position? And this can be described in 3 different ways. There's a messaging that is contained, there's blended messaging, and engaged messaging. Let me break down each one of those for a second. I am a member of a golf course that has the best pastry chef in the world, hands down. They make amazing muffins. And they do so with on-site beehives. Just like the beer we saw in the previous example, where you're harvesting honey, making beer, and then putting that out with a label that shows that that honey came from the hives on a golf course. But my That pastry chef does amazing work with the honey that comes from the bees that the superintendent and his staff, their staff, manage. You guys all get the benefit of the bees. You get the benefit of the honey and subsequently the muffin. That is a contained message that no one knows outside of your golf course that those muffins exist. Okay, so let's change that. The pollinators that exist there, let's blend our messaging into the community. The pollinators that exist there are important for pollination of plants outside of that golf course. I just told you that there's an area of influence that exists where those pollinators travel out and come back. And oh, by the way, they still come back to their hive, they still produce honey, and we still get the muffins. But now the golf course is showing that they are a contributor to biodiversity because they have these pollinator habitats who are servicing the communities outside of the four walls. You are blending your golf course's narrative into what the community's asking for, which is more pollinator habitat. It exists here, we just don't talk about it. And ultimately, what would be great is if we get away from the blended and the engaged. And the engaged is where the community comes to the golf course and says, boy, we really have an issue with pollinators in our area. Can you guys help us? Can you guys help us by planting 4 acres of pollinator habitat, which we have identified as what's needed for our area of influence around the golf course? Wouldn't it be great if they came to you and asked you to be engaged in their environmental goals? So, as was pointed out earlier, this heat maps identify space on a golf course that you can use for any number of ecosystem service projects. Any number of things. So if the community is asking you for space to make more pollinator, Matt, what's it called again? GPS services. Get the GPS services from the USGA. Go track your data. It's going to come up with a map that looks like this. You can circle these areas. You can use Google Image to actually define how many acres of land that is. And then you can start to get creative. What can we do to blend in with our community? Okay. Kevin, where am I at? Besides being in New York. 25 minutes left? Perfect. Okay, the general approach that how this works, how we identify the natural capital value of a golf course, is to estimate the value of the golf course. That's our benchmark. Okay, so we go out and measure and estimate the value of the golf course for carbon sequestration, for stormwater management, for biodiversity, for soil health. We do it for urban cooling. So we look at this whole suite of ecosystem services, and we use that INVEST model, and we estimate what the golf course is doing right now. Then we change the landscape. Change it to something else. We just actually do it by the embedded data that exists. What do I mean? So I go in to Les Bolstead Golf Course right here, and I estimate the ecosystem services that come from that golf course right now. I draw a map over top of the golf course so that I can get the area that that golf course is contained within. Then I go to a residential area and I cut out the shape of that golf course in that residential area. Now, this wouldn't be that cool except for when I cut out the shape in this residential area, it comes with all the data that exists that's needed to run that model. The ratio of impervious to pervious surfaces, the amount of tree cover that's there, the infrastructure required for roads, etc. All of that data is there. So this wallpaper effect allows us to go in, change the landscape, if not golf, then what? to change it to any other land use, and then measure it against what golf was giving the environment. And we can do it for a whole host of land uses. Downtown urban core, an office complex, a deciduous forest, a city park, an agricultural field. All of that data exists and allows us to change and measure against what golf is giving us. We chose 5 as our primary targets to compare golf against, because this is what tends to be what happens in especially these densely urban areas, that it's going to be converted to a city park, an urban residential, so high density urban residential, an industrial park, that would be worst case scenario, a natural area, so not a park, but more just a natural area, and then a suburban residential, which is less dense, but still a residential area. All 5 of those are then compared to golf. So let me show you I'll show you 2 examples. Urban heat island effect and stormwater management. Let's start with urban heat island. So in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, the downtown Minneapolis area is right here. The downtown St. Paul area is right there. Each one of these little pink dots is a temperature sensor. So we can measure the temperature at any given time across that landscape of Minneapolis-St. Paul. And you can get these heat maps. Downtown Minneapolis, downtown St. Paul. This is the 494 corridor that goes around the city. You can see and pick out where road masses are. You can look at where the exurbs are, where we have much cooler temperatures. But as we move closer into urban areas, the temperatures go up. That's called urban heat island effect. More people, more built infrastructure, the warmer it gets. So, when we were looking at this map, one place drew our attention. Downtown Minneapolis, downtown St. Paul, and there was this blue blob. This blue blob right here, a cool area. And so we drilled in on that blue blob. 1, 2, 3 golf courses that existed in that major urban area where urban heat island is an issue. You can see there is a cooling effect and an area of influence. And I mean, squint your eyes or just believe me. But you can see that it extends away from the dark blue area itself. Okay, so here's how this model works. Here's the whole thing right here. You guys ready? You're on the edge of your seats. We're going to go and measure the marginal value of the golf course as it relates to urban cooling. Then I'm going to convert that golf course into a housing development. And then we're going to compare the urban heat island impact before and then after I make it a housing development. And I don't actually have to make the housing development. That's the cool part about this. So in pictorial, here's the golf course. I'm going to wallpaper a residential area over top of the golf course and rerun the model. Here's the current golf course. Here's the area of influence of cooling that happens from the current golf course. You can see when I redevelop that golf course, I have less cooling that exists in the golf course and surrounding it by overall area. And I end up with, now this doesn't sound like much, but a 0.32 degree Fahrenheit per night change in temperature for the area near the golf course. So now we can start doing some calculations. We can do economic calculations, air conditioning, energy, and we can also look at what happens to that whole area of influence around the golf course itself. But what's really cool is now I can take not just at Les Olmsted Golf Course one, I can do all 135 in the Twin City area of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So every one of these dots is a golf course in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I'm going to convert all of them. Golf is done in Minnesota. We just got rid of it all. It's all now developed. And by doing so, the maximum temperature increase across 7 counties of Minneapolis and St. Paul goes up 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per night for a 350 square mile area. You can tell me that golf isn't beneficial to the urban landscape? Of course it is. Golf courses are urban green spaces that are of value to those that surround it. How do we talk differently about it? That's urban heat island. Let's talk about it in relation to stormwater management. So we've got the current baseline, which is the golf course itself. But what's cool about this model, I can go in and change the soil type. So I've got a well-drained soil in the golf course right now. I'm going to go make it a clay soil that is not so well-drained. Remember the first presentation this morning, I talked about the impact of traffic and soil and how that interfaces together. So I'm going to change the density of that soil, make it a poor soil, and then I'm going to do the wallpapering of a low-density residential and an urban core downtown area. And it's kind of fascinating. So let's just look at infiltration of water, because we all talked about the stormwater management opportunities that exist from a golf facility. So here's the original golf course. This is what exists now. This is the baseline for the amount of water that infiltrates, that touches that property. And this is looking at a 10-year simulation of a return frequency of an event that happens every 10 years. And we have 98% of the water that hits that property infiltrated. And if I convert it to a golf course with poor soil, 81% infiltrates, 17% runs off. And if I change that to a low-density residential, it really doesn't matter. It's still worse off than when it was the original golf course. And then if I make it a high-density urban core, look what happens to the runoff and the amount of water that's infiltrated. And that would make sense, but now we didn't have data to show that, especially how it relates to golf. Now we have data to show that the surface runoff increases, the infiltration decreases as we get more dense in the system. If not golf, then what? Flood risk. We didn't even mention that as an ecosystem service. Here's the current golf course, 9-hole facility, northeast corner of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Here's what the golf course looks like when we make it all into residential. And then look for the purple areas that exist after we convert the golf course into an urban residential area. These are the areas that now have greater risk for flood. I would be really peed off if I was these homes up here in this corner, that after I converted from this landscape of a golf course to a residential area, my basement's going to flood. So the benefit of that golf course was flood risk mitigation. If not golf, then a residential area, change that flood risk pattern. So in general, we can talk about the results from Minnesota like this. Across the bottom axis here is the golf course. And the golf course is at point 0. You got this on your thumb drive. I know that this is really small for the back, but you have this on your thumb drive. The golf course is point 0 on each one of these graphs. And so the first one is temperature, pollinator abundance, and then export of nutrients are the bottom 2. And then we change the use of the landscape to a mixed natural, a city park, a suburban residential, an urban residential, or an industrial core. And then we look for the departure from the golf course, either to the positive or to the negative, comparing it to the change in landscape use. Now this is for all golf courses in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, for 135 golf courses. So from a temperature perspective, the park and the mixed-use landscape are really similar to the golf course. But then as we start to increase our density, we start to get greater temperature departure from what the golf course was providing. Same with pollinator. We do see the mixed natural landscape have a greater pollinator than the golf course, which would make sense because it's all pretty much essentially pollinator habitat. But then as we start to move into greater density, we lose our pollinator abundance. So this is how we can interpret this data for a large area, say the Met, and where we can take all the golf courses in the Metropolitan Golf Association and start to put together graphs and figures that tell the Metropolitan Golf Association's story as a whole. So we did a city expansion. We started off in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and then we went to Detroit and Philadelphia, Atlanta, Texas, Phoenix, and San Francisco with the intention to make sure that the model worked in different bioregional areas of the country. Desert, more water, cooler temperatures, higher density. In Detroit, we were thinking about it very differently because Detroit has so much free and open land right now in that city. We enhance the ecosystem services by making more urban green space or more golf opportunities. And so in total, we have about 1,100 golf courses that we have now mapped. And we have now calculated their natural capital value and their ecosystem services. And just like with the Minnesota data, we compared golf courses to a natural landscape, a city park, a residential low density, residential high density, and industrial. Now, again, these are on your thumb drive, but you're going to see very similar trends than what I showed in the Twin Cities graphs. The golf courses cool the air, retain more nutrients and stormwater, and support more biodiversity compared to residential or industrial land cover. It's certainly golf courses are on par with more natural areas for these services. There are eco-regional differences. For example, city parks increase pollination relative to golf courses in San Francisco. So city parks are better than golf courses in San Francisco, but city parks are worse than golf courses in Phoenix for pollinator habitat. So there's different eco-regional differences that exist too. Stormwater, golf courses retain more nutrients in stormwater compared to residential or industrial land cover. And again, you're going to read these graphs the same as you were reading them before. Golf is at 0, the golf courses are at 0, and then we're comparing the natural area to the city park to the low density, high density industrial. Urban cooling, same trends that we talked about before. Increase the density of the area, we tend to see greater temperatures that exist from departure of what that golf course was. Pollination, increased density, we start to see loss of pollinator habitat, but we also have to point out that our natural areas and city parks do very well for pollinator habitat also. Carbon sequestration, increase the density, we start to lose our potential to sequester carbon, which again would make sense, because as you take away the plants and the trees, we don't have the ability to sequester as much carbon as if those plants and trees were present. We can also start to do some lifetime evaluation of this data, so a 30-year lifespan of a golf course, and look at, I know our golf courses live longer than 30 years, but they live longer than 30 years because we invest in them. And if you don't invest in them, then you start to have deterioration of the asset itself. So a 30-year lifetime valuation, looking at it in relation to each one of the cities and what the cost is to clean the phosphorus that actually gets exported from a golf course. So if it's not a golf course and it gets converted to a residential area, how much was it going to cost that community to clean the phosphorus that now is exporting at a greater amount than what it did when the golf course was present? And we can start to put these 30-year valuations for the nutrients or for the carbon, especially as you lose the carbon sequestration and as carbon becomes more of a tradable commodity, what is a golf course's position as it relates to carbon? And I wouldn't say that I would argue that we need to get into the carbon business, but we need to tell our story that golf courses are a good sequesterer of carbon, and that if it's not a golf course and traded to something else, that that'll impact the amount of carbon stored in that urban green space. Okay, so another one of these follow me here's, okay? So if golf courses can be managed to contribute natural infrastructure to enhance the well-being in urban areas, the economic well-being, the social well-being, with partners like the Nature Conservancy, can we get access to resources that will allow us to invest our green in greater green infrastructure on our property? Especially think of the 20%, the publics and the daily fees, that don't really have the ability to go and generate a large amount of money for an irrigation system or for redoing the grass or changing the drainage itself. So modern public finance, looking at these bonds, the municipal bonds around environmental impact. Can we, as a golf course singular facility, access a municipal bond to improve the environmental impact, engaged with our community around the ecosystem services provided, and do so with a lens toward the environment, but the upgrade and improvement of our facility? They're issuing and starting to issue these EIBs, and the Rockefeller Foundation underwrote a 2 or 3 trial runs of $25 million investments into different communities across the United States that competed for these environmental impact bonds, and to test the water of return on investment related to the ecosystem services around the green infrastructure that was built post-investment. Why can't we be a part of that conversation too, we being the golf industry? Funding a greener future brings sustainable innovation to your city by issuing the first public environmental impact bonds. I don't know, I look at the challenges. So Minneapolis and St. Paul has 6 municipal golf courses in their portfolio. They did a study. There's $39 million in deferred maintenance on those 6 facilities. There isn't a chance in hell that Minneapolis taxpayers are going to put $39 million into these facilities. And why is that? Because it's a highly contained message. A highly contained message. We also recognize as part of this research that we need to tell our story differently. I can't show those graphs that are really crazy with lots of lines and colors and cities, etc. So we developed this scorecard that allows us to look at a community's needs and score the city or the community based on various attributes. And so we can talk about it as it relates to water or climate or wildlife habitat. And we can also show it with different land use decisions. So the scorecard itself becomes staying as a golf course or converting it to a residential area, etc. And each time we make a land use decision change, we can rescore what is going to happen to that community based on these little scorecards. Also working on an interactive tool that allows you to go in. Now right now it's just for Minneapolis and Phoenix, but the hope is that we can expand this out over time, that you can go in and circle your golf course and do before and afters. If not golf, then what? Or that's for trying to defend yourself. Being more proactive and engaged with your community, start telling your story on the opposite side of that, of what benefits you are providing. So that also is in development right now, this demo tool. So in summary, golf courses are important green spaces. Let's talk differently about them. Let's not be afraid to open ourselves up to what the value is. Let's get away from contained messaging and blend in and engage with our community around their environmental goals and their environmental desires, and know that you have the ability to impact those goals and desires for the community that surrounds the 4 walls that exist at your golf course. Be proactive as part of the solution rather than reactive, as Tom pointed out, that we tend to always be in this industry, having to defend ourselves versus us telling our story. I certainly appreciate your time today. I appreciate the invitation from the Met. I am happy to answer any questions that you have right now. Any thoughts? Thank you.